everybody, welcome to Stamping with Melva. I'm Melva Peters and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in British Columbia, Canada. And you can find me online at stampingwithmelva.com. That sound, if you heard it, means that I'm actually live and tells me I'm live on YouTube, which is always nice to know. All right, so tonight it's a technique night. Every Wednesday I jump on at 6:30 and share a technique of some sort with you. Sometimes it's a fancy fold, sometimes it's an actual technique. Tonight I am going to continue. A week or so ago I shared using Stampin Write markers to do some coloring, and how we often, at least I do, forget about the Stampin Write markers because I love to use the Stampin' Blends, which are the alcohol markers, but the Stampin Write markers are the water-based markers that Stampin' Up! Has had, well, longer than I've been a demonstrator, because it was the very first thing that I got as far as coloring tools. Hey, Karen. I joined a club and got all of the colors, all of the collections of colors of markers, and I used them instead of having all of the ink pads for a long time. And so I showed you a week or so ago how you can use markers, particularly on the rubber ink stamps, and how you can color with them if you don't have the ink pads, and how it's a great way to color the individual parts of an image or a word with a different color. So you can go back to that video. If you can't find it, just ping me, put a comment in this video, and I will put a link to that video. Tonight I want to show you another technique that you can use, and this is watercoloring with Stampin' Write markers. There's a couple of ways. I'm going to focus on using the markers to actually color the images so that they look like you've actually watercolored them with a paintbrush, which I can't do. I am not that artistic, but I can do this with the Stampin' Write markers. I'll show you something I was playing with as another thing that you can do, but I'll save the actual making of a card and showing you how to do it until another video, because I want to actually give the Stampin' Write markers some fanfare. They deserve to be used, and I certainly need to pull them out of my cupboard more often. All right, I'm going to switch over to the desktop and we will get started. Let's see if I can get that glare off. I didn't take this out of the case. So I'm going to use another sneak peek. So this is the Memorable Blooms bundle. I haven't got that ring light glare. So it's a really pretty flower images, and then some lovely sentiments. I love it when they put the block font with the cursive font. It comes with some great dies. So not only can you cut the 3 images out, so these images are at 90%, so the dies are slightly larger, but look at these 2 amazing dies. So this one is just absolutely gorgeous. So a frame with the flowers and leaves, and then this one just kind of a nice stalk of leaves that you can use. So I'm just going to use this die to cut out my stamped image. Okay, so let me first show you. So this is the technique. So look at this. It looks like I actually took the time to watercolor, and what I did was I used Stampin' Write markers. I used Blackberry Bliss, Petunia Pop, and Lost Lagoon right on the stamp pad, and then spritzed my stamp pad to get this lovely image, and then I will die cut it. This is the technique that I think I've done a video before using smooshing, but I've typically used I think I've used just my reinkers. Well, this I actually used my Stampin' Write markers to color. So I'll do a video and show you how to do that one day, but tonight we're going to focus on, this is a lovely way to watercolor an image and use, so you can use different color markers to get this. All right, now I am using Fluid 100 watercolor paper because otherwise the basic white the basic white paper just won't hold the water like the Fluid 100. So this is a piece I cut to 3 3/4 by 5. It's the 5 by 7. So it's just a little bit bigger than half half of the paper. And you don't really need it that size, but I wanted to just make sure I had the size. And I am going to trim this so that it just is a little bit smaller, but I always start a little bit bigger. Okay, so here's my stamp. I said this before, I believe this technique where you're coloring on the stamp with the Stampin' Write markers, which are water-based, does, in my opinion, works best on the rubber stamps, but you can give it a try. Sorry, I'm trying to, there we go. You can give it a try on the photopolymer stamps, and maybe this technique will work better. If you're doing the technique where you're coloring and then huffing on it, they will dry out, especially if you're using a real big image. And so that's why I find that the rubber stamps work a little better. I think they hold the moisture in the ink a little bit more. But you can try both, especially this technique where you're going to spritz it with water anyway. So what I did was I took the marker. So I'm going to start with my Lost Lagoon, which is for the leaves. And again, when you're coloring, you want to have you're using the brush end, and you've almost got it flat against so I'm almost holding it. In fact, I often find I hold it very flat to the surface of the stamp. And I'm just trying to find all of the parts of this that are leaves. And I'm just going over them. Now, you don't have to work quite as hard with this as you do if you're going to huff on it and then stamp, because we're going to spritz it. So, but I'm trying not to go too slow. I don't want it to completely dry out, but I am trying to cover in. This is quite a detailed stamp. I'm trying to color all the leaf parts of this in Lost Lagoon. So let's see. Getting there. All right, we'll pretend that's a leaf. There we go. Okay, I think that's all the leaves. Oh, there's one leaf there. Okay. There's some leaves there. See, I always forget. You have to kind of look at it because there's lots of detail to this. Hey, Connie. So we've covered all our colored all of our leaves. Now, I'm going to take and I'm going to do the flowers in Petunia Pop. I'm doing the darkest color first. And that way, if I go over some of the others, it's not quite such a problem. And I've got some leaves here that I missed, so I'm just going to go back. And because it's watercolored, it doesn't have to be completely perfect. All right, so there is that. And then I'm just going to go over the center of my flowers in using the, oh, I think I forgot some flowers up here. So this is what happens. You get going and you realized how detailed this all right. Okay, I think I've got them all now. All right, so I would have, if I was going to stamp on this, I would have huffed. Hey, Pam. Okay, so glad you made it. Okay, so colored it with my Stampin' Write markers, and if I was going to stamp, I would have huffed, but I am going to take, this is a spritzer and it's full of water, and so I'm just going to take and spritz that. Make sure you get all of it. And now I've got a piece of the Fluid 100 paper, and I'm going to just take, and I'm going to hold it for just a minute and then lift up. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Just love how that looks. You can see it's still wet because I did get it fairly wet. Now I did not wet the paper. I just wet the stamp set. You could wet the paper, but your image is going to be a little more abstract. Hey, Roberta, welcome. A little more abstract if you wet your paper before you... Oh, sorry about that. My little basket that I have my heat tools in fell down. Okay, so I'm going to take a heat tool just because I want to use this on my card. And I want to use a heat tool that's actually plugged in. That one's not. Okay, here's one. There we go. All right, hopefully that's not too loud. I'm going to just take, I'm leaving it flat so that it doesn't run too badly. And it's only this middle section that is... There we go. All right, pick that up in a minute. See how pretty that is? It just looks like you have watercolored it. Now, what you could do, and I could have done this before I dried it. I've got a water painter here with just some water in it. And I want the water to come out of it. Why is it not wanting to come out? Let's see. There we go. Come on, you can do this. All right. No, I've mixed it up here. I've got some other color. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up some water. There we go. So I'm going to just try and gently, if I wanted to, and I don't know if this is really going to work because I did dry it. You could do some painting if you wanted to, and I think it would work better if you did this. Yeah, mine's pretty dry, so it's not actually picking up any of the color. But if you... Oh, yay, that's great. Shipping is really fast these days for those, hopefully Canada Post. I know there's still some demonstrators and customers that aren't getting their orders because of the Canada Post issue, and there's some of the couriers, like UPS actually goes through, hey Marjorie, goes through Canada Post as well. So hopefully that's going to be resolved now that our mail is moving. All right, so you could, while it's wet, you could take a water painter and do some coloring if you wanted to, but I think that's just really pretty all the way it is. Okay, so I'm going to take the die. Haven't used it yet. And we're just going to take and we're going to cut this out. So this piece of Post-it note tape, and I think it'll fit, yes it will, into my little machine. I always like it when it'll fit in my little, my mini Stampin' Cut and Emboss. I don't have to haul my big one over. Oops, there we go. So as I said, the images are at 90%. So when you stamp them, the images on the front are 90%. So when you stamp them, they are slightly bigger. There we go. Isn't that pretty? So that's going to go on my card. But I've saved my piece because I am going to take... She says if she can find it. My Blackberry Bliss is gone. There it is. I'm going to take the Blackberry Bliss. Actually, I'm not going to do this. What am I doing using an ink pad? I don't have to use an ink pad. I can use my Stampin' Write marker. So I'm going to use so this is the technique I showed the other day where I'm coloring the stamp using my markers. So there's the thanks in Blackberry Bliss, just going over it, making sure it's really covered well. And then I'm going to do the so much in Petunia Pop. And now you want to huff. And then you can take and stamp. And voila, how cool is that? Now I have thanks in Blackberry Bliss and so much in Petunia Pop. So it's not quite as perfect as it would be if I had just inked it up, but it's such a cool technique. It goes along, definitely goes along with the watercolor appearance of my flowers. And it's a fun way to do parts of the words in different colors, or even some of the letters in different colors. So I'm going to do my handy dandy, because I can't not fussy cut. You guys know me by now. This is watercolor paper. Didn't have to use it, but it does go nicely. It's got a bit of a kind of creamy tinge to it, and so I like to use it when I use the watercolor for the image itself. Okay, so what else have we got? I went ahead and cut out, I've got ink on my hands. So I've got a piece of Petunia Pop that is 3 3/4 by 5. And my card base is a Blackberry Bliss that is 4 1/4 by 11. So we're going to take and score that at 5 1/2. Fold into the mountain and use your bone folder. Okay, so we've got our, oh, I didn't say that. I embossed my Petunia Pop with the distressed tile embossing folder. So we've got that. Pretty simple card, really, but the technique is the fun part. Now, this is Fresh Freesia seam binding, and it is one of the products that you can get when you place a $75 order. So I thought this seam binding will go nicely with my Petunia Pop. So we're just going to take and cut a piece off. Probably don't need that much, but I'm going to take and tie a bow. And I'm about 1 inch or so, 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches from the bottom of the card base. Now, like I said, I've said this before, I always turn my piece of cardstock that I'm trying to tie my bow on upside down. And I've got my tweezers to act as my extra set of hands. And so then I control where these tails go. So when I do my bow, I intentionally put the tail towards the bottom, and then I can bring this one around and keep the tail towards the bottom. I just find this an easier way for me to try and not get the tails all twisted and facing the right way. And maybe you have other techniques for that, but this is the one that works for me. And see how this is gorgeous. We haven't had seam binding for a little while, and I love seam binding because this is crinkled and it ties bows so, and they're so pretty. Okay, I will trim that in a minute. All right, and when I have ribbon on the back of my card, I always use a Stampin' Seal, and I go right over the ribbon. Some people use tear and tape, but I find Stampin' Seal will hold it. My Stampin' Seal doesn't get used much, so it's kind of like my Stampin Write Markers. I kind of like to use my Stampin' Seal because now that I've switched over to the liquid glue, it doesn't come off the shelf as often as it used to. Now you can use a glue dot, and so I'm just going to put this glue dot underneath the bow just to hold that in place. Now here's a technique, here's a tip for you, and I don't have one in here. If you find that your glue dots, this stall starts to unwrap, take a little piece of ribbon and tie it. You can just tie a knot, wrap it around not tight, but just wrap it around your glue dots like that. Come on, out you come. There we go. There we go. So you've got this little knot tied, and now this won't unravel. It is such an amazing thing. I remember when I learned about it at convention. So just kind of holds your glue dots in place. Okay. Side note. Let's find some dimensionals. I have a new package of dimensionals. Okay, brand new. There we go. So let's take some and put on the back. And pop this sentiment up as well. All right, I think it's going up there. There's a little bit more room. Okay, now embellishments. So more sneak peeks. I showed these the other day. These are the purple adhesive backed sequins, berry burst, like a Highland heather, bubble bath, and then white. And I think the white is, they're kind of a pinky iridescent white, so I think that's what's going to go and show the most or the best. And now we need something on the inside of the card. So let's take this flower. I haven't put my labels on, so we'll just do it this way. All right, so we've got our markers. So let's do the same technique. I'm going to start with, this time, the petunia pop. Go over the flower part. I don't know what kind of flower this is, but it's very pretty. Now this is where, because I'm going to stamp with this, you have to go a little quicker than what I was doing when I was using the water to spritz. So I'm not gonna, try and keep going here, because when you huff on it, is that a word? You don't have a lot of moisture in your breath, but you do have some. And then the last two, let's just do the, there. Ooh, that turned out really well. So I did the petunia pop for the flowers, the Lost Lagoon for the leaves, and then the inside of the flowers I used the Blackberry Bliss. So it does, I mean, sometimes you find if one are a little too slow at huffing on it, it dries. So just go over it if you find that it's taking you a little bit of time. You might have to go over the spots on a cake, like repeatedly, just to get enough ink. But I didn't take very long at that, and it went pretty well. Now let's try some Wink of Stella. I'm not going to do it on the inside of the card, but I'm just going to go a little bit over just the flowers. And so, yeah, okay, and I've said this before, the Wink of Stella, I don't know what the solvent is, but can you see that flower in the center where I went over it with the Wink of Stella is a little pinker. And so whatever the solvent in the Wink of Stella, it actually, even though that's been done for probably 10-15 minutes, it continues to move that ink around, which is what I was trying to do with the water painter. But the Wink of Stella just adds that shimmer to it. Let's see if that works. Oops, let's see if I can, that's a little out of focus. The shimmer to it is still out of focus. There we go. But also moves and makes it a little bit pinky in color, which is kind of pretty too. So there we go. All right, so there's my card. Using another sneak peek from the upcoming mini catalog called Memorable Blooms. It is the bundle. I can't wait to try this really cool die. So that's the bundle, and then the other sneak peeks that I used were these purple adhesive backed sequins and also the Fresh Freesia seam binding. So pretty. Lots of things to choose from in the celebration. Yes, bring out your Stampin' Write markers. If you're like me, I love to color, and so I always color with the my blends. But the Stampin' Write markers work really well, especially if you're just coloring and you're not too worried about doing some blending and getting some of that more detailed coloring going on. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining me. I'm just trying to make sure I got all the comments. Hey, Karen. Hey, Marjorie. Marie, welcome. Yes, thanks, Marjorie. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everybody. Yeah, no, you're not doing anything wrong with the Wink of Stella. If you don't want the ink to move and color, you really have to either take your heat tool to it or let it dry for a good chunk of time. Because look how long, I probably had that sitting there for 10 minutes or so, maybe even a little bit longer, and it continued to move the ink around. I don't know what the solvent is, but it's a really lovely effect if you want to paint with your Wink of Stella. All right, everybody, again, thank you so much for joining me. Now, I will be live again on Saturday and Sunday as normal. Probably getting into next week, I'm going to take the time off at least Monday night and then Christmas Eve and, of course, Christmas night. But I will be live on Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. on Saturday and 12 noon on Sunday. So hopefully you will join me for one of those times. And if not, hope you have a happy holiday and